Hello everyone on lesterbanks.com. This is Daniel Brodeski here and welcome to my new tutorial. At today's tutorial we are going to look at how to recreate the shockwaves which Andrew Kramer created. He actually made his own tutorial about this subject and he used fractal noise in his tutorial. But today we are going to use a different method. We are going to use a third-party plugin, which is the particular plugin from the Trapcode suite created by Red Giant. So as you can see, he created some really awesome shockwaves, and he didn't do it in After Effects, but today we are going to use After Effects as our working tool and we are going to achieve something cool as well. So let's see a preview of what we are going to create today. So that's actually what we are going to be creating today. This is our shockwave element, and I obviously used the basic technique which Andrew taught in his own tutorial. Let's get started. I'm going to open up a new project. In this new project, I'm going to create a new comp. So Ctrl N on my keyboard, and I'm going to call it base. I'm using 1280 by 720, 25 frames per second and 10 seconds long. Let's click OK and create a new solid. So Ctrl Y on the keyboard and call it particular. I'm going to make sure it is comp size and then click OK. To this particular layer, I'm going to add the particular effect, and I'm using the FT toolbar, which you can purchase on ascripts.com. It's a very handy tool, by the way. So by default, particular looks like this. I guess most of you are familiar with this effect. Let's dive a little deeper today than we usually do. Let's open up the emitter section and change the emitter type from point to box. And I'm going to zero all of these parameters. So set the velocity and the velocity random, velocity distribution, velocity from motion, emitter size Y and emitter size Z, all of them to 0. I'm just going to increase the emitter size X. I'm going to increase my particle count. Right now I'm using 10,000 particles. And believe me, that's not that much. Let's open up the particle section. In case you're not familiar with the change the size to 1. Open up the size with Shockwave package. I'm going to choose this Here preset. Just a brief linear descending of the created for it. Choose the same preset for the particle over life. I'm going to increase the size random a little and increase the opacity random a little. Let's go back to the emitter section and go to the beginning of the timeline. Set a keyframe for the position X and Y by clicking on its stopwatch. Now move 2 seconds forward. Click U on your keyboard to reveal the keyframes of this layer, and then set another keyframe. Now make sure that the first keyframe holds the position of the screen. So I'm simply going to scroll it upwards till our particles are not visible, and now they are coming and we have something which looks like this. Now as you can see, I have this weird glitch where all the particles disappear. That's basically because of the caching of the effect. If you have the same problem or a similar problem with the particular effect, you can solve it by going to Edit, Purge, All Memory and Disk Cache, and it will simply erase all of the cache that After Effects created. And make sure you purge it at the beginning of the timeline, so you purge the glitch as well. And now as you can see, we don't have this problem anymore. Now what I'm going to do is open up the particle section again and set the life from 3 seconds to 1, and then go to physics, air, turbulence field, and increase the size to 2 and the position to some high number, around 300. I'm also going to decrease the fade in time to something like 0.1. I can also zero it out to have this clean edge. And now to the fun part. Let's open up the auxiliary system. And right now the emit is set to off, but we are going to set it to continuously. And we are getting this crazy look, which we are going to change. First of all, I'm going to change the color from main to be 100%. I simply want it to be white. I don't want the particles to be that big, so let's change the size from 5 to 1, and let's open up the size over life and select the same preset. Let's do the same with the opacity. And right now, that's what we have. I'm going to increase the particles per second, and instead of 10, I'm going to have 60. So I have longer tails. And I'm also going to increase the life of each particle from half a second to 1 second. So I have much longer tails. Now what I also want to do is make sure that my particles disappear as they come to stop. So let's open up the emitter section again, and let's set a keyframe for the particles per second, roughly at 1 second, and then go to 2 seconds in your timeline and set the particles per second to be 0. And now you simply have something which looks like this. And let's preview it real quick after purging, of course, because we might get some glitching. It happens. Now before actually having a look, let's go to the physics and change the effect size from 2 back to 0, just because it creates some unwanted effects. And now let's preview it. So it looks like this. That's pretty cool. I'm going to bring the particles to a stop a little bit further on the y-axis. So just drag them downwards. Now you can play with all of the parameters in the physics section and see how each influences your final result. I'm going to increase the spin just a bit. After increasing the spin, I'm going to increase the particle count. As I said, 10,000 particles is really not that much. I'm going to increase it to 100,000 particles, which is 10 times as many. Let's see how it looks now. Now it is very render heavy, and it takes time for the computer to process all of the motion on the screen. As you can see, it's not that easy. What I'm going to do is actually decrease the life for my auxiliary system to 0.75, and I'm also going to drop the resolution from full to quarter. Maybe not quarter, maybe half, just so it renders a little quicker. I'm also going to drop the size from 1 to 0.75. And now let's open up the physics air mode only of the auxiliary system and increase the turbulence position, and it will add to the randomness on our screen. So let's increase it to like 100 and see how it looks like. So it definitely looks cool. It smooths out some of the lines and creates a very nice feeling to this whole look. Now let's come to the actual part where we create the shockwave form. Let's create a new adjustment layer in our comp. I'm going to drop the resolution to quarter because it works really slow. To this adjustment layer, I'm going to add an effect which is called polar coordinates. So just drop it onto the adjustment layer. Before going any further, I want to turn off the auxiliary system just to make the process time a little faster. So set it to off and we will turn it on a bit later. Back to our adjustment layer, I want to change the type of conversion from polar to rect to polar and increase the interpolation to 100. Right away you can see that our particles are arranged in a circle and they are spreading outwards as time goes on. Now setting our resolution to full, you can see that it looks pretty awesome. Now you can see an ST cut over here, an STH. Now Andrew showed how to get rid of this, and I'm going to use the exactly same technique. Let's create a new adjustment layer and put it in between our two layers. I'm going to add the offset effect to this adjustment layer, and let's turn off the polar coordinates adjustment layer just for a second. With this newly created adjustment layer, let's take the offset effect and scroll on the x-axis till we see our cut right here, and I'm going to mask it out. So select the rectangle masking tool and just mask it like this. Set the mask mode to be subtract, and now let's just feather it out, and it blends everything nicely together, and we don't have this nasty cut like we had before. You can turn on your polar coordinates again, and you can see that it is all smooth. And now your particular effect is spreading out very nicely like this, and then it simply disappears. Now watch what happens when I turn on the auxiliary system again. Now it definitely looks cool. Now it doesn't look like what Andrew created in his package or in his tutorial, but it definitely looks very, very cool. That's another awesome variation for a shockwave. And as you can see, it was achieved pretty easily and can be easily manipulated by changing all of these parameters. Changing one parameter will result in a completely different look. So let's see what happens if we change in the physics the fade in time, which I zeroed. It was set to 0.5, and see what happens if I set it back to 0.5. You can see that our edge is very stationary, and I don't like it, so that's why I actually zeroed it out. You can leave it on some low number like 0.05, and then you will have a very small stationary edge like this, but I'm going to disable the auxiliary system again, and let's add another effect to our particular layer, and it is going to be the turbulence displace. So let's add this effect after the particular effect. I'm going to set it to vertical displacement. Now it might not make a lot of sense, but just for a second, let's turn off our adjustment layers and increase the amount of the turbulence displace, and also decrease the size. You can see what it does to our particles, and when turning back on our polar coordinates, you can see how it actually affects our whole look very nicely by creating this very organic distortion. You can also increase the complexity to have some more detail, and of course that's another tool to create variation in your shockwave. That's how it looks after turning on the auxiliary system, and I increased the turbulence displacement a lot just to show you the effect, so it will be clear. I'm going to drop it to around 50. I don't want it to be that dominant. And here we've got our beauty back. So now let's create a few levels of detail. I'm going to turn off the auxiliary system again, and let's duplicate the particular effect. Let's open up the emitter, and you have a random seed option over here. I'm just going to change it so our particles are arranged differently. I'm also going to decrease the particle count. So go to the first keyframe of the particles per second, and let's drop it back to 10,000. So we have much less particles. I'm also going to change the seed for the turbulence displace. So let's open up the evolution options over here and simply change the seed. Let's drop the complexity to 1, and the amount I'm going to increase to 70. It's not some exact science, I'm just doing some randomization in the values. Let's disable the previous layer of our particles just for a second. So here how it looks now without the auxiliary system turned on. Let's go into the physics section and increase the wind on the x-axis, and it will actually make it spin. As you can see, it spins. Now I don't want it to spin too much. I'm also going to change the spin frequency to 0. And this is how it moves now. Let's turn on the auxiliary system and see what we get. And this is the very cool effect we get by turning on the wind. If we turn off the wind, We don't have these circular lines like we have with the wind turned on. So that's definitely an enhancement to our whole look. I'm going to turn on the previous copy of the layer and make sure that the auxiliary system is turned on, and let's see how it looks. It definitely looks very cool, very organic and smooth and powerful. I'm going to shift the layers on the timeline just a bit. So the whole secret behind this effect is adding different effects and playing with their values, randomizing everything, adding different levels of detail. You can also add a blurring effect. I'm going to create a new adjustment layer and add a fast blur and increase the fast blur to be 1 pixel, and it just blends everything nicely together. You can even set it to a lower number like 0.7. And now you can take your base comp, drop it into a new composition. To this layer you can add the color vibrance effect. Ironically, it was created by Video Copilot. It will help us to easily color our shockwave. First of all, I'm going to turn on the fill empty BG, so it will not erase any particles. And I don't want my shockwave to be that greenish, I want it to be more of an orange color. I'm going to add some glow and increase the radius and maybe decrease the threshold. And let's create a simple background. Let's create a new solid and add gradient ramp. Set the shape to be radial. And don't forget to set your base layer to screen mode. And now let's change our ramp so the starting point is at the center of our comp. Let's move further the endpoint. I'm going to create a background which looks like this. And now let's add a new adjustment layer and just add a little bit of contrast. I'm going to increase the ramp scatter just to get rid of these lines, so we have a smooth background. And so basically that's it. You can go ahead and render it out. If you want, you can enable time remapping of your layer by going to time and enable time remapping, and you can set the time remapping keyframes to easy ease and play with their speed values and create different speeds to your animation. It will really add to the final effect. I hope that this tutorial was useful for you and you learned something new about the particular effect and how you can use it in an original way. Variation is the key in this example. Create different levels of detail. Always change the parameters to see how the final effect looks. And hopefully after some experimentation you will get a very cool shockwave of your own. I'm Daniel Brudeski for lesterbanks.com. Please check out the other tutorials on the site, it updates all the time. If you have any questions, post them in the comments down below. I will make sure to link you to the original tutorial of Andrew Kramer and to his package as well. So don't forget to check out the other tutorials on the site, and I will see you next time.